Hey everybody, and welcome to live stream number 44. Today is Tuesday. It is August 15, 2015, and it is 3 p.m. Now, if you're watching this, you are watching the recording as we haven't got anybody in the live stream yet. But this is live stream number 44. So we're getting up there, folks. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch these videos. Today's topic is what's new in Fusion 360 in the August release, besides sheet metal and a couple of other things. So if you haven't opened Fusion for the last week, you haven't noticed, but if you have, you've noticed that you got a update. This was a great update. I can see we already got a couple of people jumping in here. This was a great update that came out in the middle of last week. Now, the big thing of that update was sheet metal. So sheet metal is now part of Fusion 360. And if you go back to the latest live stream I did, what was last week before I went on vacation, I talked about what the K factor means, because that's important when you are talking sheet metal. But today I want to talk about some of the other things that was released with what's new last week, because I feel like that a lot got kind of like overshined with sheet metal, and there was a couple of other things in there I think was important, at least important you know. Down in the description area of this video, you will find my email address, lars.christensen@autodesk.com, and you are definitely more than welcome to send me any future topics you would like to see. Also, down there you will find the link to the blog that came out on the Fusion channel with all this what's new, and including what I'm going to show today, but also, of course, the sheet metal. Also, if you have not, I would really appreciate if you hit that subscribe button. Hit that subscribe button, hit the little bell next to it, and you will get notified about these live streams. What, as planned of, are going to happen the remaining of this week at 3 p.m. So this time slot, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's like the same time as New York City. That is where I am located. Man, I hope you're doing well. All right, I can see that we got a bunch of people in here today. So I really appreciate it. 34 people in a couple of minutes. That's absolutely awesome. And of course, the great thing is that this is also being recorded. So it will be up on the YouTube channel in just, 20 minutes after we're done with this. Cool. I can see we got so many people in here. We got Rob. We got Peter in here. We got Bob. We got Gary. We got a bunch of people. Really appreciate all you guys taking the time. Let's talk a little bit about what I think are the highlights of this release inside of Fusion. So let's get in there. All right. So inside of Fusion, I think that one of the bigger things was that you now have something called Selective Cache. And some of you guys I know already have watched me talk about this in the past, but in case that you have not, so spare with me if you already know about all these things. Fusion 360 saves to the cloud, and it saves locally on your machine at the same time. A lot of programs do this. So cache means it's stored locally on the machine. It lives there on your machine for a certain time before it is removed from your hard drive. It will always live up in the cloud. But so your machine, what happens is that you're sure that you have the latest projects you've been working on your machine in case you're not online. So let's say you have to travel somewhere, you go out to a customer or whatever. But of course, all of it is up in the cloud. Now you can control the cache time if you go up to your settings and you go into your preferences. Up here you can choose right here how long you want to store files locally on your machine. So in my case here, it could set up in 60 days. You could set it to 90 days. I think you can set it up to 360 days, so a whole year. So that means that if you go offline, you can still access things on the latest designs you've been working on. So in my case here, the last 2 months that I have had open inside of Fusion would be selectable even if I'm offline. I hope that that kind of makes sense. So it stores it both ways, but on your local hard drive, in my case, it gets wiped every 60 days of anything that I have not touched for those 2 months. And again, you can change that inside of the preferences. Now, if you go into, so if I go offline right here, so if I go up to the job status and I right now go offline, so I'm going to click on going offline, you will now see that it's going to change over here to say you're working offline. Now, immediately, I don't necessarily see any big changes over here other than my refresh button and search button are gone. But if I go in and start looking at some of the designs in here, let's go into this technical camp folder and open that one up, and let's go in and look at the 3x's folder. You can see that some of the files in here are grayed out. Like, they're still there, but I can't do anything with them if I click. Now, this one here I can actually work with, and this one up here, because they've been opened in my computer within the last 60 days. The other ones over here I have not worked with in 60 days, and therefore they have been cached out. They're not any longer available. Let me go back and make things online again here. So click on the little time clock up here. It will go back online. You will see things going to update, and now I have access to those. So why is this happening? Well, primarily it's doing that so you don't have to have these huge hard drives with all these files. And I'm actually a little bit in that dilemma right now that my C drive is actually getting full, so I can lower that cache size. Now, before last week, if you had to go out of town and you knew you would be offline, what the trick would be was that you would just open up the files that you knew you were going to be working on, thereby bringing them within the 30 days of cache. I hope this makes sense. Now, you have actually gotten some pretty neat tools in here that you can work with. First of all, let's do it on a file-by-file basis. So you saw before that when I went offline, this file here was not in cache. It's only existing up in the cloud right now. It's not on my computer. I can right-click on it, and you can see that I can add it to my offline cache. Now, if I do that, that means that instead of before where I had to open it up in the browser by double-clicking on it, I can just click on it right here, and when I click on it, it's now being brought up to cache. And it's actually showing over here that it's doing that right now. So there you go. Now this one is brought in my local cache. So by right-clicking, you now have this option right here. Now you can actually also take it a step further. You can also go on a folder basis. So you will see that over here I actually have some different folders. You can also right-click on a folder, and you can now add the entire folder to offline cache. Or you can also go out and you can do it on the entire project. You can right-click and you can bring that entire project on cache. So this is, they're keeping on developing on this, and this is not the end of this whole cache thing. But this is, I think, a really huge step to make sure that you can pick what you're getting on them. Now, there's another thing I got to show you with this, and that is if we go back into the project, also notice how there's a gear folder up here. That's not new in the settings. Now there is actually, you could also have cached this whole project here, so I didn't have to go out and right click on Technical Camp. But another thing that is really handy is there's a checkbox, View Offline Cache. So if you check that checkbox and you go down here, we scroll down here, oh, I have all the folders, let's go back into that 3x's folder. If I go in here and say View Offline Cache, you can see now that this one is now solid, but this one and this one are still gray. So this is just showing you what it would look like if you were offline. So click the little gear icon, click View Offline Cache, and you immediately get a picture of what is offline. So you can quickly look in here and see what you maybe want to bring on or off, just like that. So pretty important to know. Right click on a file and you can just bring it offline on the cache. Right click on a folder, you can do that. Go into the project and you can either click on the settings key up here and take the whole project as cache, but of course you can also go out to the root and you can right click out here and bring a whole project to cache. And then two more things. One thing is you can now view what is cached and not cached in the project with that little checkbox. And then what you show up here is it will actually update you up here when things are being brought on board. So I think this is extremely handy. Great thing. This whole thing about storing cache and also in the cloud, something that the development team, I think, have really done a good job trying to continually making better as we are learning and as you guys are using it and giving us the feedback. Definitely love that. Okay, next thing we're going to look at here that is handy to know. If you have followed these live streams, you know that if I go in here and open up a sketch, and I'm just going to sketch a circle here, C for circle, and let's make this one 1 inch diameter, and let's extrude that. One of the things we have talked about in the past were the capabilities of adding threads to your model. So if I click the thread model here and I click this face, by default I will get an image showing me the thread, kind of like a bitmap that is just resembling. There's no thread on this part, but it's just showing us that there is, it was intended to be threaded. Now, of course, you can go in and you can right click, hit edit the feature. You can check the box called modeled, and now you're getting the actually thread modeled here, what is super, super nice. Now, I did a whole live stream in regards to checking these threads, so you can definitely go back and search through the live stream. You will find that. But what is the difference? Why do you have the two? Well, in most CAD systems, you do not have the option to actually make it threaded. Normally, you just have the bitmap selection here. And the reason for that is that when you make it fully threaded, now the software have to solve all these extra faces that are in here. What can slow your computer way down. So older CAD systems just stayed completely away from this. Just said you cannot do that. It's bad practice. Don't do it. But because of the way that Fusion has been developed, the developers actually found a better way. That the software had a better way to handle this because it is a newer type of software. However, if you start getting a lot of threads in your assemblies, well, then you will see a performance issue. You can definitely see a performance issue. So the way that developers handled this was that now you have this document setting up here, and if you have a thread, threads in your assembly, you can go right here and you can switch every thread that is in that assembly to be cosmetic. So if you do have an assembly with a bunch of different threads in it and they all are modeled, and suddenly you start seeing that you have performance issues and you're like, man, this thing is not working. It seems like every time I'm trying to rotate something, the computer's kind of like stuck. Go up to the document setting and switch it over to be cosmetic, and you probably, if it's the thread that is causing the issue, well, then you should be all good. All right, cool. The next thing I want to talk about is that was added a couple of new slot tools. Let me just delete a couple of these features. Let's get back into our sketch environment. Edit sketch. A couple of new slot tools was added, and this is really, really handy. So they added the 3-point arc slot and the center point arc slot in here. So you got 2 more arcs you should know about. So one is the point arc, the 3-point arc slot. So one click, there's a dimension, another click, and then you get to kind of like control the arc, and then you get a thickness that, of course, you can always type in as soon as you have these boxes here. So that's one of them. The other one, as you will see, called center point arc slot. So these are following kind of like the arc environment over here. So we got the 3-point arc slot, and now we got the center point arc slot. So center point, click here. And now, and you would actually see they also appear over here on the sketch palette. So if you open up the wrong one, you could actually change over here, or if you put it on the S key. So if you went over here, let's get out of this for a second. Let's hit the S key. So in the S key here, we have we can add different things. So if I go in here and add slot, I might choose in here that, you know, I'm just going to select the standard center point slot. I'm just going to put it up on my menu here. So anytime I hit the S key, I now have that one. You can actually switch to any of the other ones. So the second one that was added was the center point arc slot. Click once, click twice, and then you will see that you got the first one is the center, and then you can add the other slot there. So that's 2 new slots. Control all from over here on the sketch palette was super handy. So that is cool. And that brings to another one you need to know about, and that is they have added tangent dimension. This is pretty cool. So the way you do that is D for dimension, right? You get the dimension tool. Now if you right click, you now get an option down here if you want to select center, what have been the default versus tangent. So let's do it the old way. Selecting center, if I go in and I select this arc here and I select this arc here, I get kind of like the tangency point between the two. But if I go into dimension and right, whoops, let's get all the way out of that. Go into dimension, right click and say select a tangency. Then I can select on this tangent, I can select on the circle tangent, and now I get the tangency between those. So that is found, you have your dimension tool active, so that's D. You'll see next to my cursor I have the dimension tool. Right mouse button, and you can now select tangency, and it will actually do a tangency between 2 circles. And another little caveat that might be handy to know is it's actually smart enough to know where you're selecting on the circle. So if I go over here and let me delete this one here, let's do one more, right click, tangency. So if I select the inner circle here and the top of the arc, I get what we just had. If I go in, right click, select tangency, if I select the inner circle again, but now select the bottom of the other circle, it's smart enough to know where you're selecting, where the tangency should be. So that is pretty cool. Hope this is helpful. All right, the last one I wanted to show today was in Incam. So this is pretty nice. So if we go in here, I have this round part that I modeled up here, and I have a turning setup. So one thing, if you're doing turning, this you know, you're gonna like this. Let me just go perspective. You will see that when I define this one, I have a little bit of stock in the back. I have a little bit of stock in the front of this part. Now, if I go in and I create a turning operations, I'm going to select the turning profile, go in and select some kind of a turning tool. Then, well, one thing I want to show you, I'm going to be doing a video on the turning improvements here, hopefully very shortly. One thing you will see here is that they actually added grooving here on the first tooling tab, if you're not aware of that. And they will actually let you, and Mike did a great pop-up if you hover over it here. You can now control if you want to allow grooving radial or axial. So that is pretty important here. So definitely check that out. That's coming in another video. I'm going to say not allowing grooving here. Now, if I go ahead and say OK, let's just take a look at what we get. We get a tool path that you will see actually goes and does the front here because I had that extra stock, and then it goes right to the end here. Well, sometimes when you're doing this kind of operations, you really don't, you maybe have taken care of this already, or you don't want this, the start point to be right here. Maybe you want to move it up because of the thread, and sometimes you want to also have the material go further back. You're holding it in the chalk back here, so you want to go a little bit past this area. So what they have done is they have redone the confinement on the back here. Has actually been completely changed and is a lot more like you will see on a milling area. This is going to be, you're really going to like this if you're new to this. So I can type in, first of all, I can select if I want to go from the, again, Mike did a great pop-up. If you hover over it, I can select stock front, what is kind of like what I have here. I could select model front, right? I can also actually just grab the handles and start moving it myself, or of course going to selection, and I could now select that whatever edge I kind of like want that to be. So I don't want it to be a point, but actually an edge here, and make that 0. So now I have eliminated the front here on the thread, and then again with the back, you can actually select on it. You can just drag an arrow, or of course you can type whatever kind of like you want in here. Now when I hit OK, you will see that the tool path has now been, it's not starting until where I set the front, and you can now easily going back. This was actually pushed out from a user who was kind enough to ask us, the CAM development team, to do this, and they thought it was an awesome idea, and they implemented it. So in here, it is literally the selections. You can now control your confinement a lot better, just like you're doing in a mill environment. I hope this was helpful. I did not touch on Eagle is now inside of Fusion. So that is, if you have like PCB boards, you can now communicate with Eagle. I am not an expert in this. I will definitely have to do a little bit of playing around before I can show it. So I'm just gonna be lazy and put that on the back burner. But check that out if you're into that. If you check down in the description area, you find the blog post. You can definitely click on the video, the YouTube video there, and Bryce is going into it in depth. Also, don't forget about the browser. You now have access to the browser. If this is brand new for you, Fusion 360 can now run in a browser where you have a bunch of other tools in that, so you don't even need to install Fusion. You can log in via Chrome or Firefox or something else into your Fusion account. I did a live stream on that a few weeks ago, so search for that. And then sheet metal. Well, I didn't want to do sheet metal today. We are going to do a little bit of sheet metal tomorrow. How about that? So tomorrow we will talk a little bit about the sheet metal tool. Last week I did a video in regards to K-factor, so definitely check that one out. I'm not going to touch on that really tomorrow for tomorrow's live stream because, well, that was covered last week. That's about what I planned on showing today. So the rest of the week, we're going to plan on doing these live streams at 3 p.m. Eastern, just like today. So we got 3 more after that. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the new sheet metal functions. I'm going to kind of like give you kind of like my take on that. I hope that this is helpful. As always, love the thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you don't. It's okay. If you haven't already, I would really appreciate if you will subscribe to the YouTube channel, and then if you click that little bell next to it, that's how you'll be notified about these live streams. My email address down in the description area. Send me any future topics you would like to see, and I will try to fit them in there. I'm going to do it like I normally do. I am going to end the broadcast, so if you're watching the recording, Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And if you're in the live stream, I will come in and just say hi to everybody. So until tomorrow, I hope you have an awesome, awesome day. Thank you.